Hello, everybody. My name is Shama. I'm with Girls In Gis. We're excited here today to bring you our first edition featuring some of our athletes that have come up through the ranks from their youth on into adulthood. Today we have Jessie Crane on with us. How are you doing, Jessie?
I'm doing good.
Excellent. We also have Elisabeth Clay on. How are you doing today, Elisabeth?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So we're waiting on Kendall here. They had a power outage, rolling power outages in California, but she'll be on here with us shortly. So the whole purpose of today is, we know a lot of you parents out there are wondering, how is jiu-jitsu going to impact my child in the long run? Is jiu-jitsu beneficial for my children? Is it something we should look into doing to invest in our children to get them onto the mats? And here today we have 3 youth athletes that have now transitioned to adulthood and are doing phenomenal things today. So I wanted to first go ahead and pose this question. So when did you guys start training? Was it your parents' decision? Was it your decision? And why did you start training initially?
So I started training when I was 12, and it was my choice. Basically, I'd been a gymnast for about 10 years, and I just needed a sport to do. And I was like, oh, I'll try jiu-jitsu, whatever. And I tried it, and I really liked it. But I definitely, I needed a sport. It was between, jiu-jitsu, or I was going to try figure skating or diving. I was doing something. And I just tried it, and I fell in love immediately.
Excellent. How did you hear about jiu-jitsu? Was it something you saw on UFC, or was it something you had a family member that had been training in it?
And my older brother wanted to do MMA. Well, one of my older brothers, he's like, oh, I want to do MMA. But you know how the story goes. He never starts training, never even steps foot on the mat. But I was like, I'll give jiu-jitsu a try. I don't want to get punched in the face, but I'll give jiu-jitsu a try. And so that's how I heard about it. Is he's like, oh, I'm gonna do MMA. We're gonna blah 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 blah. I'll never did any of it.
What about you, Jessie? How did you get involved?
Oh, I started when I was 6. My mom was friends with my coach's wife, and so my brothers tried out the first ever class that he had, and then my dad wanted me to try it, and I was like, oh, I was doing, I was super quiet, I didn't talk, I did ballet before that. And then my mom let me try it, but she didn't let my sister try it, just me. And I loved it the first day. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing it. I really like it. And my brothers did it and my dad did it. So it's kind of I got to do something a sport with my family. And it was just I was just 6. I just liked it. I didn't really know. I was just I just get to play around on the mat.
Oh, that's excellent. And did your brother ever move on to do MMA or get on, or are you the jiu-jitsu star of the family now, Elisabeth?
He never even started training. He never stepped foot on the mat, never tried a class, never anything.
What about you, Jessie?
No, none of my siblings did anymore, just me.
Hey, Kendall, good to have you on. Thanks for joining us. We're stoked that you're able to get some power over there.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. It was 3:55. I was clicking log on, and then you know that sound when the power goes out? It was zoom, the whole house shut down. I was like, oh my God, it was ridiculous. And then I don't have any service here, so I have to use Wi-Fi. So anyway, I'm glad I was able to figure it out, and thank you guys for waiting for me a little bit. Sorry about that.
No problem. So we just started off, the question is, when did you start training? Was it your decision? Was it your parents' decision? And what was it, why did you initially start?
It's my turn? Okay. So I'm 22 years old. I'm going to turn 23 in October. I started when I was 5. And it was my my dad's idea initially, but not necessarily because they wanted me to be in jiu-jitsu. It was just I was a really active kid, and I was really social, and so they decided to give it a go. My dad was training jiu-jitsu at the time already. He was a blue belt, and they just thought I would like it, and they thought I would have fun, and so I went in and I immediately loved it. And so I think I immediately loved it, and they were just happy that I was having fun. Of course, my parents wanted me to learn self-defense. They wanted me able to defend myself. And I have a younger sister too, so that was really important to them. But it was mainly just they wanted me to have fun. So it was really laid back and easygoing.
What I was going to say is I know that, you know, in my own journey, I've been training for 17 years, and there's definitely been points where I'm like, I'm done. I need a break. I don't know. Like, has there ever been a point in your guys' journeys where maybe, you know, I know when you're growing up, you have a lot more things going on. You have friends, and maybe not all of them train, but has there ever been a point where you guys have been like, I don't want to do jujitsu anymore. I just want to go hang out with my friends, or I don't want to go, you know, to concerts, or, you know, all those things that young adults want to do. Have you, any of you faced that?
I can jump in for this one because I never had a point where I didn't like jujitsu, and I think that was really important to my training. Like, but I think it was really because my parents never forced it on me. And so if there was like a day, like I never like didn't want to train, but if there was a day I was like really tired or I had a lot of homework or something like that, like my parents didn't care. They were just like, okay, whatever, we'll go or we don't go. It was always up to me. And I think because of that, I didn't have like the pressure. I never felt like I had to train. It was always like, oh, I want to train. I'm so excited. But I did have the unique experience a little bit when I went to high school. I wanted to wrestle because I didn't want to do PE. I thought PE was dumb, but I had to do PE. So I was like, well, I might as well be on the mats. I might as well learn something that's going to help my jiu-jitsu. And I ended up falling in love with wrestling. And so I didn't like not like jiu-jitsu anymore, but I just wanted to do wrestling and I wanted to be great at it. And I was so busy with that I switched. So I was in wrestling from age like 13 until like 18 and a half. So I wrestled for about 5.5 years throughout high school and a little bit in college. So during that time, I actually competed in jiu-jitsu. So like when I was 12 and 13, this was before IBJJF like checked birth certificates. I like won the blue belt Pan Ams as a juvenile when I was 12. And then I took bronze when I was 13 in the women's. So I was still competing, but I wasn't training, but I liked jiu-jitsu. So that was for me, like I did not like jiu-jitsu, but I fell in love with something else. And so I competed a little bit, but I wasn't training anymore. And again, with that, because my parents left the decision up to me and I was never forced into it, when I did come back to jiu-jitsu, I like was more in love with jiu-jitsu than I'd ever been because I'd missed it so much. So I think that was the freedom was really the key for me.
I get some, like, I feel like when I was younger, I'd get a little bit, like, unmotivated when there wasn't girls. But I think, like, my gym was, like, at my first gym, like, you know, there were, like, older women and stuff. And I think that when I started getting, like, older and then more girls started coming in and more kids, I was like, okay, like, they're, like, I have friends here. Like, I like it. But also I think that since, like, I grew up in jiu-jitsu, a lot of my friends they all do jiu-jitsu. So something I had in common. So if I wasn't training, like my friends were going to be training, so I couldn't even hang out with them if I wanted to. So then I felt like it helped me like stay like disciplined. So even if I like was like, oh, I kind of don't want to train, I'm like, oh well, my friends are training, so I was like, I need to like stay home by myself, or like my friends will be at the gym, so I'm gonna go to the gym.
Yeah, I never had that where I didn't want to train. I always wanted to go in and train. The only time was after Worlds in 2018. I had a really bad showing and I didn't know why. It wasn't cardio, there wasn't anything going on. Like I went out there and it wasn't even like, oh, like I just got beat up and whatever. Went out there and like I couldn't feel my arms. It was starting to like, as I was competing, like it's getting dark and I was like, okay, like there's something wrong. And if I can't figure this out, like I'm done competing, because I'm not going to compete if I can't like be at the top level doing it. But as far as like training and not wanting to train anymore, I started training 5 days a week immediately and then moved to 7 days a week. And it's been that way for the last 8 years. And I never had those days. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go train. Like the way to get me to do anything when I was younger, my mom would be like, you don't get to go to class if you don't do this. And I was like, oh, well, what do you need me to do? I'll do that right now. I want to go to class. So yeah, for me that was never an issue. That was the way to get me to do something, was to be like, you can't go train. So you need me to do what? I'll go do that right now.
Do you think maybe, and you kind of touched on it, Kendall, a little bit, do you think that maybe it was you know, you see those parents that are like out there yelling on the sidelines at their kids and really putting those pressures. Do you think that maybe that contributed to what kept you guys in, is that you didn't have somebody that was kind of forcing you to, like, you have to go train, you have to perform? Do you think that's something that maybe contributed to you guys still loving to do it? It was like a reward?
Yeah, I would definitely say 100%. That was the case for me. And, I think I have a unique perspective. Now, I'm not sure if you guys do, or I know some of you guys do, but I don't know if everybody here does. But I'm a full-time instructor as well, and a school owner. So one of the things I see the most with kids, because we have a really big kids competition team and kids take it very seriously. We have casual kids too, but we have some kids who compete at very high levels, and medal at Pan kids, and they're incredible. And honestly, what I would say is our kids who do the best are usually the kids whose parents are not hands off, but just a little less, I don't know, not involved, but not in charge of their training and like trying to like coach them through all the techniques, and the kids who usually quit and have the worst experience in jiu-jitsu, which breaks my heart because you think they would want to train if this wasn't the case, is the people whose parents parent them differently based on their results in competitions, right? And they treat them differently based on the results in the competitions. And that's really, really heartbreaking because for me and for our kids that I see actually do the best and have the best results and just have the most fun and are like the longest lasting. They train for 10 plus years. I know some of these kids since they were 3 to 13. Those kids are usually the ones whose parents absolutely treat them the same way, whether they win or lose, right? And they don't make their love results based. Number 2, they're not overly involved in the results or like the kids' jiu-jitsu while they're there and they're supportive. And a lot of times they train. They're not trying to be their instructor or their coach or in charge. And then 3, the kids have a lot of freedom. I have one kid in particular who's an orange belt, and he's extremely, extremely talented. He's a great kid. He's been training with us for 10 years. But this kid, for the first time a year ago, asked to take some time off jiu-jitsu and play football. And his dad was like, yeah, absolutely. Right. And this kid came back to jiu-jitsu and like medaled at Pan Kids after training for like 1 month just because he was so in love with it. So that was a good example for me to see like, wow, like these kids, it's different when you start training when you're 3 or 4 because the mats are all you know. And so if you're not allowed to do anything else, it's like you learn to hate it. So for me, that was definitely the case. And I see that a lot with our kids. Yeah.
What about you, Jessie?
My mom's been super, super supportive. Like, she's like a jiu-jitsu mom. Like, all she does is like, watch me train. Like, she likes to go places. Like, and she pushes me sometimes of, oh, like, you could do more. But I think she it's more like a gentle, like, oh, like, like trying to get the best out of me, but not forcing me to do anything. Like, I remember when I was little, like, she made me do like 6 divisions, and like I'd be like, I don't want to fight the boys. Like, when I would get like 13, and she's like, no, like, you could do it, or like she's very good at like motivating me without pushing too much. Like, she made me do wrestling. Like, I didn't like it, but like it helped. Like, she makes me like, like do extra, like, and I'm like, okay, like, I get it. Like, but she's also like, if I win, like, sometimes she's like, it's okay, like, you won. And then like she keeps me humble. Like, sometimes I'm like, I just want to like impress my mom, and she's like, oh, good job. Like, good job. And then like if I lose, it's the same way. Like, she just like, it's fine, like, go back, like, train, like she doesn't really, like, I don't ever think she gets mad at my losses. I think as long as like I handle it humbly, like I like learn and like keep training, like, she's fine. Like, she likes it. And my siblings are the same way. Like, they don't train anymore, but like they still go to my super fights. Like, my sister loves taking photos, so she takes photos of me and my team. Like, my brothers like are harsh on me. They're like, don't come home if you lose. Like, they like to joke around with me. So at least it's like fun, like, where I'm like, okay, like, they're very supportive. So I know, like, if I lose, like, they're going to joke with me. And if I win, then it's like, they're going to celebrate with me at home. So I don't really feel like a lot of pressure.
How old are you, Jessie?
I'm 18. I turn 19 in a few days.
Oh, nice. Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
A fun time.
What about you, Elisabeth?
I think it's important for parents to not put a lot of pressure on their kids because same thing, like, I've coached a long time in the sport, and also coming from gymnastics, you'll see the same thing. The kids that end up quitting, it doesn't matter how good they are, how much talent they have, is when you have parents in there, and it's not, I think a good way to put it is they're parents that are living through their kids. So they put all that, like, if they win, it's such a big thing. You'll see these parents, like, it's not like they're just happy, like, oh, you did a good job. You can tell there's more to it than that. They're living through their kids when they win.
Like,
but then the same
pride.
applies.
Exactly.
And then the same thing applies that when they lose, that then, like, you know how hard you can be on yourself when you lose? So then think of like a parent putting that on a kid because they feel that way because they're living through their kids because of that. Or even like in the training, I've had parents yelling at kids, and I'm going and come over and I go, sit down, you're not allowed to talk. My parents aren't allowed to talk. If I'm teaching, you can't talk. I don't want you when they come over going, hey, blah 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 when this happens. No, you're paying me for a reason. I'm the coach. You can come in, but sit down, be quiet, and don't say anything. And I same thing at competitions. Like, it's one thing to be supportive in that, but you shouldn't be yelling, because a lot of kids, even if the parents are just supportive, I've seen kids that shut down when their parents, even excited, start yelling because they want to impress their parents so bad that they forget everything that they're doing. And even if it's not on purpose, if the parents are living through their kids or putting that pressure on them, even unintentionally, then the kids aren't going to be doing it. Because I know, coming up through it, like, I put enough pressure on myself as it was. I didn't need any added pressure. I seen someone going, oh, you want to go do that competition? Okay, good. We'll do that. Oh, you want to go training day? Okay, that's nice. Oh, you don't want to do that one? Okay, that's fine. Like, whatever I wanted, just supporting me, but not pushing me in any way. And if at any point I was like, okay, like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Well, you've put a lot into this. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's extremely important for parents to support their kids and whatever their kids ask to do, and to support them in it, but never to push them. And it's a very fine line.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you just hit a really important point, Liz, because, like, that really resonated with me. Like, we put enough pressure on ourselves, and we care so much about what our parents think and how our parents feel about us. Like, growing up, your parents are your whole world. Like, that's their whole world. And so their approval and their love means everything. And we put so much pressure on ourselves. Every kid is different. Some kids maybe need to be a little bit more pushed than others.
Yeah.
But for most kids, if they're asking to train multiple days a week and they want to do that, they're motivated. You don't need to shove them onto the mats. If they're wanting to train 4 or 5 days a week, you're good. You don't have to do anything, right? So with those kids, it's like, we are putting enough pressure on ourselves. We do not need any more, because all we need is love. Like, my parents, I have a very interesting situation because my dad is my professor. And so even growing up with that, a lot of the times he was very hands-off. It was like he would let other people coach me. And then afterward, he was just like, I love you. You did a great job. Congratulations. We are so proud of you. It was always that. We're so proud of you for going out there and fighting and doing your best. If you did your best, we're so proud of you. That was it. It wasn't like, oh, we really, really need to work on this and this and this. That was like a few days later, but we put enough pressure on ourselves. We don't need that, because we value that opinion more than any other opinion in the world. And so if we hear a hint of disappointment, it's crushing. It's absolutely crushing. Like, it makes me emotional to think about the little kids I see deal with that. It's like so hard. I'm so blessed I didn't have to have that. But it's very hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's the coach's job to do that anyway. It's not the parent's job. You put the kids in there for a reason, and if the parents if coaches need extra help from the parents at home, the coaches should then ask. Like, if something's going on in class, kids misbehaving, something like that, it's the coach's job to then go and talk to the parents to find out what's going on, if they need to then work together. But until that point, it's the coach's job if the kid's not being motivated in class, if the kid's not doing things, or it's their job to then go talk to the parents. It's not the parents' job to be in the middle of it and, oh, you're not motivated, I'm going to push you more. Well, that's part of what the coach is there for. You're paying them for a reason.
Absolutely. That's an extremely important point right there. I can't even imagine. I started as an adult. I was in my early 20s when I started, and I can't even imagine having that pressure. Like, you have so much pressure yourself, and then you want to make your parents happy, and then you got that additional, and your tiny little brains can't even like handle it. It's a lot. But so another area that I wanted to kind of touch on is, you guys have transitioned. All of you guys are adults now. How do you think that jiu-jitsu impacted your development into adulthood, like into that transition as you embarked on it? And, a lot of times teens, you get stuck in adult classes, right? So you're stuck interacting with adults. Do you think, what are some of the benefits that you saw yourself that you picked up in jiu-jitsu that have now helped you now that you guys are young adults?
Well, I started doing the adult class, I think I was 10. I started doing the adult class. So I was like, okay, like, I would work with some of the smaller women and stuff. And I think, like, it made me, like, learn to be more mature, because I'm in the adult class. Like, they're all adults. Like, I have to be more, like, mature. And another thing is like both like my old coach and my new coach, they both like talk about eating healthy. So I grew up with like a bunch of people around me telling me how important it is to eat healthy, how important it is to be respectful, like how important it is to be disciplined. And then me going to practice every day, like I learned how to be disciplined, like in and out of jiu-jitsu, because then I know like my professor like right now too is very much of like, what are you eating, like what are you doing, like are you doing the work outside of the mats, like are you like how are, even if I'm like out of town or something, he's like texting me like, how was your training, like how are your rolls, like how are you feeling, like if I'm hurt, like how are you, like there was a like I got hurt like a year ago, like I hurt my hip, and he would text me all the time like, how's your hip, are you still like doing what you can, are you going to like therapy and stuff. And so he taught me like very much like how to be respectful, like very much like how to be disciplined and like take care of myself as like not just like as an athlete but outside like as a person. So I feel like I have like developed a really healthy lifestyle because of jiu-jitsu, because I've had so many people like preach to me like the importance of it. And then also since I want to be the best, like I know like I have to be in the best shape, like I have to like do everything I need to do in order to be like give myself the biggest chance like to win. Like if I'm like in my healthiest shape and I have the best cardio, like if I like am lifting and I'm doing everything like that, like that I'm learning like, oh, okay, like even now I'm still learning, like I still feel like I'm still like learning a lot like of how to like be better. But I have like a lot of role models around me that are like already done everything, so I feel like they've taught me a lot. And since I was younger and growing up, it's kind of like subconsciously in me as well.
You can go this. I'll go last. Okay.
Yeah, so I started doing the adult classes when I was 12, so almost immediately, like when I started training, I started doing the adult classes. So because of that, like what Jesse was saying, just being more mature and having that, but because of it, all of my friends were also older, so I never had that like the thing of certain like what kids will do never made sense to me when they would like go and take off to go even to like prom and stuff like that, or they would just go and, oh, I'm gonna skip class and go to the movies and stuff. Because even like the other younger people that were in the class, I didn't hang out with them. I was hanging out with like the adults and the upper belts. So it never made sense to me. People would be like, oh, when you get there you'll understand, and I'm like, no, I don't. Or I even had it less than a year ago. We were talking about one of my friends, and he's like, oh, you mean, you know how it is, like when you're young and you go and you just take time off to go do stuff, or you just don't want to train. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, when you're like 19. And I was like, you realize we're the exact same age, right? I'm 19 too. No, like when you're like 19. I'm like, yeah, I'm 19. No, you're not. I was like, do you need to see my ID? I was like, we're the exact same age. No, I have no idea what you're talking about when you just go and you just skip training or come in and mess around. Oh, so I matured fast and grew up faster, but not in a bad way. It was because I started traveling at 13, doing competitions, flying from Alaska to California, being gone for like a week, just hanging out with my teammates. Like I learned to manage my money early. I learned a number of things that I think are definitely important for now.
Yeah. I similar to both you guys. I started training when I was really young, and my dad was just a blue belt at the time. But then when he was a brown belt, I was like when I was 10 or 11, he opened his own school. So that changed things a lot for me quickly, because I went from being in the kids class at 10 to him now opening a school. I was an orange belt. So then I was a kids coach at 10 and 11, and then the only people for me to train with were the adults, right? Because he had just opened a brand new school. So I would say I started training with adults around the same time as you guys, like 10, 11. And I was also a bigger kid. I was tall quickly, and I was like really strong quickly. And so like when I was 10 and 11, I was competing with like juveniles and adults and teenage boys, probably, again, similar to you guys. But I think, man, I've learned so much from jiu-jitsu. And again, like you guys said, I matured really quickly, I think, because everybody that I was hanging out with was in their 20s and 30s. I didn't really hang out. Like, I actually have a gymnastics background too. I did gymnastics from like when I could walk, like 2 years old, until I was 12, and I competed a lot and stuff. And so that was really the only time I was around a lot of people my age. And then when I started getting a little older in jiu-jitsu, it was like all adults. Like I was 11, 12, 13 with 20 and 30-year-olds and my dad. And so I was really close to my parents, which I'm really blessed to have that opportunity to be around them a lot and learn from them a lot. But a few key things that I learned, like I didn't realize that I learned to manage my money early until I looked back and saw that I started traveling at the same age as you, Liz, like same time. And with wrestling too, I was traveling all over the world. I learned how to manage money early. I also learned how to, I think I came out of my naivete a little bit early because I was around a lot of men that were much older than I was, and I had to learn quickly what was going on in the world and expectations and things like that. And so I matured that way really quickly. And then also it just taught me how to be so tough. Like jiu-jitsu has taught me, and wrestling too has taught me how to be so tough, because I learned that, like, people would always ask my parents, like, oh, how do you make her get good grades? And they're like, we don't make her get good grades. She goes to school and she does what she's asked. Like, and I think I learned that in jiu-jitsu. Like, no matter what's put in front of you, whether it's sprints or a lot of rounds of sparring or an arm bar that's really hard for you to do, it's hard, but you can still do it, and we can still do hard things. And I think that's the thing that a lot of kids miss out on, unfortunately, and adults too, is learning that just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not possible to do. And it may take a few days, a few years, a few months, 10 years to learn how to do it, but you can still do it. And because I learned that on the mats, that translated everywhere else. It translated to school, to college, to wrestling, and anything I was asked to do, I did it. And so I think that's what I see a lot of our kids do. Like, we have a lot of kids come into jiu-jitsu, they're not doing very well in school, and I'm sure you guys have seen this as well. They start doing jiu-jitsu, and for some reason, a couple months later, man, they have straight A's. It's crazy. It's amazing to see how that happens. So that was a big development for me. And it really taught me how to, and the last thing that I'll add to that is, one thing it taught me is how to not buy people's, that integrity is important, and that doing what you say you're going to do is important. The reason why I learned that is because you have all these guys and girls come in and tell you they want to be a world champion, and then they never show up to train, right? And so I realized very quickly that I didn't want to be that guy, because I saw how it looked, and I was like, okay, this doesn't mean I have to be a world champion. And yes, I want to be that, but this doesn't mean I have to be a world champion. It doesn't mean I have to be this doctor. It doesn't even have to do this, but whatever I do say I want to do, I better do it, and I better actually do what it takes, not pretend I'm going to do what it takes. So that doesn't mean that I have to be the best at everything. That means that when I'm choosing, I better actually choose something I love and not fake it. And so that I learned very, very early. And so I was really able to navigate my life under that, along with my parents always telling me that I didn't have to do anything in particular. I could do what I loved. Living in that mindset really allowed me to flourish, because I got to just choose things I was passionate about and be honest about what I was passionate about and really go for it, and not spend time on any BS I didn't care about, like a lot of people end up doing because they feel pressured to. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys touched on a lot of things that they don't teach you in school, right? They don't teach you how to manage your money. They don't teach you life lessons. They don't teach you interpersonal relationship skills on how to develop relationships, intimate relationships, with each other. And you do learn that fast when you're around adults, because you're dealing with adult situations, right? Did you guys ever find that maybe you couldn't relate to people your age because you did excel in that maturity a lot faster than your counterparts?
You want to go, Jessie?
Well, for me, I think I was like a little bit lucky. Like, I had a lot of friends that I've grown up with that did jiu-jitsu, so I had a lot of friends that, like, I feel like were like the same, and a lot of like at my school, we had a lot of wrestlers that started like younger too. So at school, like in wrestling, there were a lot of kids who they started wrestling. And so even though it was a different sport, like they knew like discipline, they knew like all that type of I feel like they had matured as well. So I feel like I was lucky, because a lot of I grew up with a lot of kids, like even if they didn't train at my gym, like that would train at different gyms and stuff, like we could still talk and like hang out. And they were like we were like kind of the same. We had a lot in common and everything. So I didn't really have to worry too much about I would still have a lot of adult people that I used to talk to, but I still had a lot of like kids that were my age that I could like relate to and like hang out with, that like I felt like I really like could like talk to and wasn't like, oh, this kind of person like kind of mature, like they don't really like, they're not really disciplined, they don't really do anything. But like since they all did jiu-jitsu, like I felt like, oh, okay, like we all have the same goals, like we all like know like what it takes to get there, like so I feel like that helped.
I'll go. So I definitely think it was a thing for me. Like there was never anyone my age. They were within like 5 years of me. I was like, oh, you're such a kid. Like 5 years older than me. It didn't matter. I was like, I don't understand you. You guys are stupid. Why are you doing that? And it like honestly probably until recently, and there's still a lot of people around my age, but there are now like some people around my age that I'm like, oh, like we're okay. But I definitely like I never hung out with anyone around my age. Like I say I was like 30-year-olds. That was like my group, like late 20s, early 30s. Like that was my group. Even the early 20s, I was like, what are you doing? I don't understand you. You're doing weird stuff. You're just making stupid decisions. And they're like, oh, but this is a good idea. What are you talking about? So I definitely think for me, like, I couldn't hang out with anyone, even someone around my age, because they're so immature that it never, I was like, I can't handle this. I feel like I'm with a kid. Even though you're older than me, I feel like I'm with a child.
What about you, Kendall?
Yeah, I definitely struggled with that a lot. I was lucky to, when I was wrestling with Team USA, that was a really unique situation because there's people aged like 13 to, well, and beyond until 30, if most people stop their Olympic journey around 30. But I was hanging out with those people, and I was really lucky to get around people like that because they were people very much like all of us here. They're very motivated, very on the same track. Like they want to be Olympic champions. So everything in their life aligns to being an Olympic champion, all their decisions. So luckily I was able to spend a lot of time with people like that. But that was like when I was traveling and competing or going to camps at the Olympic Training Center. When I was at home, I definitely felt like that in high school. I was just like, oh my God, like I felt like I didn't fit in. And, looking back, I do feel a little bit of like, oh, like I was more mature than them. But in the moment, I don't know if I realized that. I was just like, I don't fit in. Like, I don't match these people. Like something's off. Like not necessarily something's wrong with me, but I just felt like, like this is so weird. Like my life is so like, I don't care about any of the things they're talking about, And so now looking back, I realized it was a maturity, but I also like for a long time when I was in high school, we debated moving me to the Olympic Training Center and just training there and just being like a full-time athlete and being homeschooled and stuff. And with gymnastics too, we thought about that. But I'm very, very glad that I didn't, because one of the other things that I've learned, and I have a little more perspective now than I did before, now that I'm almost 23, just a couple of years, like, because when I was 18 and 19, I didn't get this. But now that I'm just a little bit older and I see people my age or that age, I realized that it is good that I spend some time with people my age, because even though I didn't get along with them and I wasn't on the same page, I think it helped me still enjoy being a kid a little bit. And I didn't have to grow up too fast. So I was already maturing really fast. I'm glad that I didn't get homeschooled and like only go to Olympic Training Center, because even though like I wasn't super into prom and all that stuff, like I still have the memories, and I got to like relax a little bit and do those kinds of things. I'm glad that I did, because I've had experiences now with people that are a lot older than me where I, like almost like just like dangerous situations or inappropriate situations, like where if I had grown up way too fast and I was doing that when I was 15 rather than 18, I could have seriously gotten myself into some trouble because I didn't really know any better, So yes, I fell out of place, but I am glad that I went through that, rather than like my parents were the ones who didn't let me like just go to the Olympic Training Center and just do the whole thing, because I would have been 15 around 25 and 30-year-old people only. That's it, with no adult supervision. Like that's not good for a 15-year-old kid. Like it's just not good. You need some time to develop before that happens. So anyway, that's my answer. Yes, I fell out of place, but I'm still glad that it happened.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and close out with this. If you were to speak to the parents of jiu-jitsu today, what advice would you offer them? Could be anything. I'll leave that open to you.
Go for it, Jessie.
I don't know. I think like if you need to be like, if you don't train, you have to be very like empathetic of like your kid, because I've seen some kids who are like so good, but their parents are so hard on them that they lose their confidence. So even if they do like have the skill, sometimes like lack of confidence that they lose from like their parents being too hard on them, like really like hurts the kid. We're like, this kid has so much potential, but like the kid doesn't know it anymore because like he's so hard on himself. So just like as a parent, like just be mindful, like if like, especially I think that my mom used to say like it's good for the parents to train too, because then they kind of like once they're on the mat or if they compete, like they understand. So either train or like be empathetic and like kind of let your kids, like if he loves it, like he'll love it and he'll motivate himself, because there's a lot of motivation in the sport. Like, and if just let him have fun with it. I think that's kind of all you can do.
Just support your kids and whatever they want to do. Just help them with that. If they want to train once a week, if they want to train 5 days a week, if they want to go compete, if they don't, whatever it is, like, just support them in that. And if you feel like they're at a stump, instead of going and taking it out on the kid, go have a talk with the coach, because the coach is going to have a better perspective than you do, especially if you don't train and they do.
Yeah, I would say, just like what Liz said, as a coach, I really appreciate when parents are really communicative. So rather than, communicating with your kid about jiu-jitsu, I'd recommend talking to their instructors, 100%. And then also just keeping it fun, like the same thing you guys both just said, like whether they want to train once, twice, 3 times a week, whatever, they want to compete and train every single day, support them in that. Because the truth is, you have, like, this is how my parents viewed it, and I'm really grateful they did. You have a certain amount of control over your child for a certain amount of years, right? And after a certain amount of years, that control goes away. And so there's 2 things to think about there. Number one, how do you want your child to remember those years? And for me, my parents wanted me to remember that I had choice and that I was fun and I was supported and I was loved no matter what I decided to do. But number 2, you can't control what they're going to do when they're 18, 19, 20 anyway. You're not, once that happens, they may move out, like you have no control. And so the best thing you can do to lead them to the path that makes them the happiest, in my opinion, is by supporting them and letting them make their own decisions and giving them like dignity and freedom of choice. Now, every kid is different, and some kids may need a push, and that is very real, or, different, a little more tough love and situations like that. But for the most part, if the kid's not having fun, they're not going to want to do it. If it's something that you find important because it's self-defense, or because they need to be active, or because you believe it's really powerful for the mind, or whatever it is, you like the environment. If you want them to do it, it needs to be fun. So you need to be somewhere they're having fun, and they need to feel supported, and they need to be able to have fun while they're there. So that may mean taking a step back, or it may mean you getting on the mats with them and showing them that you're passionate enough about it and interested enough in it to get on the mat without coaching them, but just training and enjoying it side by side. Because that was a beautiful bond that I was able to have with my family, where I got to do it with them, but I wasn't like bossed around by them at the same time. And so I really admired them and trusted them, because I was like, man, how hard this is. Like, this is so hard. And now, normally, I know you guys know this too, parents will be super bossy. Once they start training, they shut up. Because they're like, oh my God, I was telling you to bridge and roll them over 10,000 times. I didn't realize that's so hard to actually do. So I think that's really powerful.
Oh, well, it was such a pleasure having you guys on. I'm so happy that we were able to get you guys together to share your insight, because I think it's so important, to get your perspective as children that have gone through it and now are blossoming into young women. And I'm really excited to see where all 3 of you go. I think the sky's the limit, and I think all 3 of you have amazing heads on your shoulders, so anything's possible. So thank you again for being on today. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. It was a pleasure having you guys on, and we will see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.